I wish I could say in life that I think everything through. You're here, I'm probably the only one. All of you guys, you think everything through all the time. You consult Jesus about everything. You never mess up. But I'll tell you what, I mess up a ton. And the reason being is because, unfortunately, occasionally, I listen to myself and culture, which says this. Culture says, you do you, and what you want is what's best for you. That is not true at all. Now, some of you guys may be like, yeah, you know what I do? I just follow my heart. That is the worst advice, all right? But you want to know why? Because sometimes my heart tells me at 11:30 to go to Taco Bell. That's a bad call. There is no scenario where you're like, that was an amazing decision. Whatever. That's just a little thing. And then there are times in my life where there's big decisions and big things that happen that I go, I want what and I'm like, wait a second. Is what I want and me being me what's best for me? Because you see, here is the reality. To live life to the full, you can't do and live any way you want. Now, I know that's not very PC, but I'm not a very PC guy. Here is what's true. You have to follow God's plan. Now, if you're new to faith and you're just exploring this and you're unsure about God, Jesus, faith, the church, you may hear this and you might be like, Jason, I don't know if I agree with you on that. Because I've been living life and things have been going pretty good for me. And I would say that's wonderful. I did that for decades in my life. But here's the problem. Life and sin and hardship and pain will eventually catch up to you. I heard a quote years ago that which is internal always becomes visible. And it's true that if you don't have this foundation in God that we're going to be looking at today, at some point, life might be great, life might be good, but you are not whole until you have a life in Jesus. And that's why I love the teaching that Jesus has here, as he's teaching to a crowd of people, and he's teaching them these things that they can live by. Over in the book of Matthew is where we'll be. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Bible's broken up into Old Testament and New Testament. And we're going to be in the New Testament. We're getting to hear about the life of Jesus. And the first 4 books of the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are different vantage points of the life and teachings of Jesus. So if you've never read the Bible, or you rarely read the Bible, which statistically, believers, I think the last time I read the stat about it was something like believers, people who go to church all the time, read their Bible 30 minutes a week max. And I'm like, man, I think if we claim our life is foundationally on that, I think that might need to change. And so if you're new to faith or long time in faith, there's a good chance that we all need to hear what Jesus is sharing. And it's over in Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 24. He says, therefore, and I had a teacher, a professor in college that says, anytime you see a therefore, you find out what it's there for. It was a bad joke, but but now I think about it every single time, decades later, I'm like, all right, therefore, we see, and back, he had already done some teaching about how we need to live and how we need to be, and then he says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man, and the key, puts them into practice. It's like when you tell your kids to pick up their shoes for the 1,000th time. It would be really great if they did it, I don't know, the first time. Putting them into practice is a key thing. Put it into practice like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And I want to pause there because these listeners would have understood what is about to take place in this story. I love when Jesus shares these teaching stories because he knows his audience. His audience is in a place where they would build on rocky territory, but they also had the Sea of Galilee where people would try to, because it's beautiful. I've been there. Looking out, it is amazing. But people would try to build their houses as close to the water as possible. And that is really, really dumb. And the reason being is, and we can see this, and I know this from friends who live down in the outer banks of North Carolina, where a storm comes in and people just want to be as close as they can to the water until the ocean consumes their home. because there's something about a foundation that matters. And so these people would build with their hands. They would be in this area knowing what Jesus is talking about. He says, put it in practice like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not what? Fall. It did not fall. Because it had its foundation on the rock. But he turns the tide a little bit. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice. And so we hear this and now they're going, all right, he told us a bunch of things that we need to live our life by. Now he's addressing me. And if I was in the audience and I was listening to him and go, oh no, that's me. I don't always do that. Who does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. If you don't hear anything else, when we look at this contrasts of foundation, of building on the rock or building on the sand, because you have Jesus giving us one perspective, which I would say is really the only viable one. And we have a world and a culture who gives us another one. When culture says, just do you, if you don't hear anything else, my prayer is that you hear this. When culture says, just do you, be like Jesus instead. When culture tells you, live the life you want to live, everything is fine as long as it doesn't hurt anyone, the problem is that every decision that you and I make has a ripple effect towards other people. Everything that we do then has consequences. You can't just go out and say, today, you know what I want to do? I'm going to, me be me, I'm just going to rob a bank. I highly suggest you not do that. Because not only are you going to put yourself in danger, but then you're going to put the people in the bank in danger. You are going to get punished. Someone could get hurt, someone could get killed. But, oh no, Jason, you do you? No. We have an opportunity in life to make one huge decision. Am I going to follow me and make me God? Or am I going to follow God and step back and watch as he guides my path? As we look at these foundations, I love the way that Woodrow Kroll puts it. It says, the God who knows you the best knows the best for you. The God who knows you the best knows the best for you. I'm married and I have 3 daughters, 16, 13, and 9, almost 10. And I tell you what, there are times where I think I know what's best for me, and then I can see the look on my wife's face and be like, yeah, I was thinking of doing whatever. And my wife, she is the most loving, most kind person in the world, but she hears me being stupid, and she'll just kind of give me that look. And I'm sure, guys, if you're married or in a relationship, you've had the look like, why are you so dumb? And then the question behind that is, why am I with someone who's so dumb? And like, she kind of gives me a look, I'm like, what? She's like, that's not a good idea. And she will lovingly explain why my idea isn't what's best for me. And I wonder why that is. And there's something about the person that's closest to you knowing better for you than sometimes you do. Now imagine God, the God of all creation, who created you, who knit you together, who knows the amount of tiny hairs on your head, or for some of us, lack thereof, who knows everything about you. He knows what's best for you. And so the question probably needs to be, how's your foundation? How's the foundation that you have in God? The God who loves you, the God who made you, the God who knit you together. Recently, we had a pool put in. We came to that stage in life as a family, and we don't have in-ground pool money. Some of y'all might have that. We don't have that. We have above-ground pool money. Actually, we don't even have above-ground pool money, let's be honest. But we put in an above-ground pool, and we go to the place, and they tell us all the things, and they tell us, here's what we got to do. We got to prep the ground, and then we got to level it out. They said, hey, do you have like any trees in the way? That might complicate things. We're like, no, we got rid of the trees. Au contraire, little did we know how much the trees would cause a problem. So the crew comes the day of setup. The stuff's already been there for a while. We have like 100 metric tons of sand that have become a beach because of the rain that's come down before they came. And they come to our backyard and they look and they start digging. And about 5 minutes in, the guy comes and says, "Sir, can I speak to you?" Anytime someone addresses you like that, it's bad. "Sir, can I come speak to you?" I'm like, "Yeah," walk over. He said, "Now see here," I'm looking out. I've never put a pool in. I have no clue what he's asking me about. I'm like, "Yeah, I see here." Then meanwhile, I'm going, "Huh?" And he's like, "All these roots that are here?" I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, chop them out, bro. But I don't say that out loud. He's like, "We can't install your pool." Like, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't have above ground pool money, but I just spent above ground pool money. You gonna put in a pool today. And so I said, no, you can just like chop them up and stuff. So no. And he explains to me how the roots, they're eventually going to just like, shrink up and die and then like decay and then it's gonna drop out and the whole thing. And he's going on. And all I hear is, "You're never getting a pool. You're never getting a pool." He goes, "But there's a solution." And I'm like, "Praise the Lord." He goes, "You can call somebody to come and dig up all these roots here." And all I hear is change. I said, "I don't know who to do this." He said, "Call this guy." Call that guy. That guy comes out 2 days later. Sends out a guy who during COVID, it hurt his eyesight. I did not know this. Came out with a machine. He's almost fully blind, cutting up roots in my backyard. I didn't know this until like days after they had come and dug everything up. He goes, "Yeah, do you do a good job?" I was like, "I guess so. I don't know. There's dirt and less roots." He's like, "All right, good, because sometimes that guy doesn't get everything because he's almost blind now." I'm like, "Why are you?" No, but I didn't say a word. And so I'm like, "All right, call the pool company. When can we get it scheduled to put this pool in?" They're like, "A month from now." I'm like, "Oh." Tell my daughters, they're all, "Oh." And so a month goes by, they come. He comes, walks in the backyard, and I hear the same thing. "Sir, can I have a conversation with you?" I'm like, "Oh, beep, 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 beep." Like there's things I'm saying. I'm like, I'm going to say them in my head, not out loud. And I walk over, "What is it?" He goes, "These roots." I'm like, "I called the guy you said." He's like, "Well, what they thought was going to be 3 hours took 8.5, almost 9 hours as they dug out root after root after root." And I'm like, "Why are you doing this?" And he explains to me the whole process. He says, "We got to dig down. We got to lay down this sand. We got to put down this framing. Everything has to be level because if you don't, your pool will be ruined." He says, "We have to have the right foundation or you'll have a year of use, not 10, 15, 20 years of use." And so when I hear that and that much work and energy and time and money and things that go into a pool, how much more important is it for you and I to look at our foundation in Christ and following Him? It is exponentially greater and more important. And so I guess what I need to ask you is, are you open to evaluating your life to see if your foundation is one set on Jesus? Which leads to 3 kind of follow-up questions. And so if you're very OCD, this would be number 1. Do you think your foundation is important? Because for some of us, we'd say, "Well, yeah, I think it's important. I go to church every Sunday." Some of you maybe even take it a step further and you go to a small group, or I think you call them life groups here, that you go and do these things. You're like, "Yeah, and I even serve." Woo, like I got all the boxes checked. You go, "I know my foundation's important." And I would say, do you? Because I meet people of faith who think they check all the boxes, who think their foundation's built on what they do, not whose they are. You can do a bunch of things and never really have a foundation in God. Let me say that again. You can show up on Sunday, go to small groups, serve, feed the homeless, do all the things, but not be connected in relationship to the God of all creation. And that's a scary thing, but I love the way that the half-brother of Jesus, James, put it. He says, "Come near to Him," over in James chapter 4 in the New Testament. "Come near to Him, and He will come near to you." When we think about the power and the importance of a foundation, last time I was with you, as Brett said, I was pastoring a church. Healthy, vibrant, thriving. And God kind of worked on my wife and I in our heart. He says, "I think I have a new thing for you." And I said no. My wife was like, I think God's confirming we have this new thing coming. I'm thinking, well, go back to God and try again. Because I like what anybody from the outside would have said. The church is growing, you've bought land, they had a building, you renovate a building, you made more buildings on it, things are growing, things are good. And God kept saying to us, do you trust me? Basically what he's saying is your foundation one on me or on what you do? In all the last 16 years, we took care of my wife's dad, who lived with us. He's a retired Marine Master Sergeant. And we felt this pull that God was changing things. And one of the things was he was changing was to be with him and care for him. Moving me out of ministry and taking a job in the marketplace, doing a marketing job for a national realty company. Then 9 days later, we had to look at this question of, do we think our foundation's important? Because I came down from a meeting, I was working from home and everything was fine. And then I came down again 30 minutes later as people are arriving and he was complaining that he wasn't feeling well. He was healthy as a horse. That morning I got the mower out for him. He wanted to mow the lawn, in his mid to late 80s. Like, he was healthy though. And then as my daughters went upstairs, he started having a seizure and we called an ambulance. And as we called the ambulance, they arrive and they take him to the hospital. And as we're at the hospital, we arrive and they've already called. It's not even been 20 minutes. They've already called the helicopter to airlift him from the hospital we're at to the Norfolk Heart Hospital because he had an aortic aneurysm. Normally, people that have those, it's fatal immediately and they fall down and die. They thought, and they're thinking, like, we've caught it in enough time. We're flying him there. We're going to go into surgery. We go home. We tell the girls, we're going to the hospital. We're going to be there. They're there for hours and hours into the late night, early morning. And then we have a doctor come out, and tear-stained glasses. I can see behind him as we make the walk and sit down. He says that we did everything we could, but there's nothing more we can do. He's got hours. And my wife and I are running through all these emotions of this man who we've loved dearly. He had become my best friend, which rarely happens that you're best friends with your father or mother-in-law. But he's my best friend and my wife's hero, and we're hearing this news that 10 days later we had already left a vibrant community because we thought we were listening to God. And God, why? Man, we knew in that moment that we really needed that foundation. And what God began to answer along the way is that if I had still been in ministry, he would have died alone and my oldest daughter would have come home and found him. And God was knitting this plan together that, do you trust me? Not to do what you want, but what I need for you. And God is doing the very same thing in your life in this moment. Do you trust me with your foundation? Because if you do, I'm going to take you places that you probably don't want to go and do things that you don't want to do, but I have a reason and a purpose for it.